Welcome back everyone to the Dark Forest. Consider subscribing and smashing that thumbs up if you're new to the channel. Make sure to check out my Spotify and Apple Podcast and download your favorite scary story, Tales from the Dark Forest. Around the campfire, I have my good friend Entropic Society. He's got some skinwalker tales to tell. Now, let's get spooky. Being the new kid in town is never easy. It's harder when you move across states. My parents both decided a change was needed, mostly because they couldn't stop arguing or cheating on each other, but couldn't leave each other either. So instead of divorcing, and I'd have 2 birthdays, 2 Christmases, 2 Thanksgivings, and 2 houses, they decided to continue their arguing, but a few states and multiple days' travel away. Friends I had since for so long, we cried as we said goodbye. And though we knew that we could still video call, we also knew it would happen less and less. We'd forget each other, and we'd never see each other again. We'd likely keep up passively using social media, but that's as far as it would go. It's not that I disliked my new school, it's that it was different. Starting halfway through a semester was never going to endear me to anyone. They already had their friend groups, and I was the new kid trying to fit in. I'd never been popular, but I had friends. Being thrown into a new school meant I started with nothing and nobody. My parents would ask me how my days were, had I met any friends. I'd half laugh and shake my head. It's been a week and barely anyone speaks to me. I'm gonna go do my homework. I'd hide away in my room and watch my screen, waiting for a reply from one of my old friends, but none ever came. I'd been at my new school for a month when I received my new friend request on the school's private social media program. A certain high-profile app and page were blocked within the school, so they had come up with their own version that was accessible inside and outside school, as long as you were a student. 6 requests. They were all popular kids in well-known circles, and I had to question why they wanted to be my friends. It took me a full hour to accept and add them in return. Seconds later, a chat request popped up. I had been added to a group chat. Chat begins. Mike. Hey, what's up, newbie? Newbie? They didn't even use my name. Me. I have a name. Lucy. Well, we'll use it once you come with us this weekend to go camping in the ranch. Me. Camping? Ranch? Daniel. Yes. You heard about the old Cookson Ranch. Lucy. Unless she lives under a rock. Me. I've heard rumors about it. Does that count? Daniel. Depends on the rumors. I signed to myself and rubbed my face. Why was I even entertaining this idea? Did I want to be accepted this badly? The rumors were terrifying in themselves. Kids went missing all the time after sneaking onto the ranch, and nothing was ever found of them. Only their camp was left behind. Security had to be upped, but there were blind spots and holes in the surrounding fence. It was up a trail in the mountains where there was no cell signal and no way to get help when something inevitably went wrong. Me. Kids have died there, or gone missing at least. Mike. That's good enough. You want to have friends? I stared at my keyboard. Did I want friends? I had friends back home before I moved. Friends who played basketball, went ice skating, camped in the woods, gamed with, hung out at the mall. I wanted those friends, but their radio silence had come quicker than I expected. Tentatively, my fingers hovered over my keys as I typed. Me. I guess. Freya. Great. That won't happen unless you camp with us this weekend at the ranch. Me. I'll have to check with my parents. There was silence for a few minutes, and then a slew of laughter emojis. Jason. No telling your parents. You gotta do this properly. Sneak out after lights out. You tell anyone and it's off and we won't offer this again. You'll never have friends. I looked at the clock when I heard my parents heading to their room in silence. They didn't shout anymore. They whispered angrily at each other and would stare daggers. If looks could kill, I'd be an orphan. The time was 9:30 p.m., and the lights were all off within seconds. Me. Okay. They're heading to bed around now, so I could sneak out about 10. I couldn't leave my next 2 or 3 years without friends. My home life was hell enough. I could at least make my school life easier to live. Freya. Great. We'll meet you at the dirt road that leads up to the fenced area 10:30. That gives everyone time to get there. Me. Okay. What do I bring with me? I regretted asking as soon as I hit enter. What would you normally take camping? Jason. We sleep under the stars, sleeping bag and supplies only. Me. No tent? Mike. Only pussies use tents. Chat ends. And then they all logged off of the chat and left me in the now blank conversation and the words on the screen. All users have left the chat. Messages are automatically deleted. The next day was Thursday, and I had expected to be acknowledged a little, but I shouldn't have had such high hopes. I spoke to Freya by the lockers and she looked at me as if I had shit on a family cat. She walked away without saying a word. The rest of the day went slowly and it seemed like everyone was watching me or talking about me. When I walked into the restroom during lunch and the two girls stopped talking and waited for me to handle my business and leave before whispering to each other as I left. I turned corners and students would side-eye me and motion towards me with their heads before whispering under their breath and nodding. The silent treatment would have been preferable to this bullcrap, but what could I do without making it any worse for myself? Friday was much the same as Thursday, and I coasted through the day playing catch-up with my glasswork and gathering piles of homework. I wasn't worried about not getting it done. I was what everyone regarded as a do-good know-it-all, and my GPA was never lower than a 3.5 average. As I left school that Friday, the whispers were quieter, and the knocking looks were more obvious. I felt like a dead girl walking as I climbed onto the bus and took my usual seat, alone at the front. I found myself giddy and anxious with a weird sort of excitement on Saturday. I had found my sleeping bag and had packed snacks, soft drinks, and toilet paper in the rucksack along with a portable phone charger and cables. I debated on leaving a note for my parents, but as the day wore on, they had proven to be less than interested in what I had been up to. No, this week was good. I started and watched them both eat toast with their usual spiked coffee. My dad was reading a paper and writing notes. We worked on Shakespeare in English and how he inspired so many writers of day, how he all but created the known English language by making up words. That's nice. Mom was scrolling on her phone and typing messages. In science, we built a bomb. We're going to set it under the house next week, and in biology, we wrestled alligators. Sounds good, sweetheart. Dad folded the paper and stood without another word, heading off into the den for the rest of the day. Mom didn't move or say anything as I stood and went back to my room until dinner, when we sat and ate in silence except for the TV playing in the background. Mom and Dad didn't even look at each other, and I think it's the only way they can pretend that they didn't actually hate each other now. I preferred the shouting. I laid on my bed waiting for my parents to head to bed. At 9:30 on the dot, they made their way to the bedroom and silently closed the door and switched off the lights. I waited until 10 p.m. before I walked down the stairs and through the kitchen, out the back door. The back door was silent while the front door creaked loudly every time we used it. I went over the plan in my head. Camp overnight and be back before they woke up tomorrow morning. On Sunday, they wouldn't get out of bed before noon, so that left me plenty of time to get in and pretend that I had been there all night. I had never snuck out before, never felt the need, and the further away I got from my house, the weirder I felt. Like something was going to happen. There was a cliché feeling of electricity in the air as I made my way to the dirt path. The walk didn't take me long, but walking up the path, I only saw 3 other people waiting for me: Mike, Freya, and Jason. I looked between them and nodded awkwardly. Just waiting on Lucy, Daniel, and Gary, right? Oh, they'll be joining us later, Jason replied. Let's go. The feeling of something grew within me, but still my feet worked, and I followed them up the trail. We dug down as we got to the fence, and followed it around to a badly fixed hole that easily led us into the ranch. I was going over what to expect. Pranks to try to scare me for sure. Maybe they would abandon me and leave me to get into trouble. They'd try and get me lost, and come Monday, I'd still have no friends and everyone would find it hilarious. Why was I really doing this? It took me a moment to realize Freya was speaking. Oh, pardon. Sorry, I didn't hear you, I half laughed. I said, why did you move here, newbie? She sighed at the fact that she had to repeat herself. Oh, parents made the decision. I don't know why specifically, to be honest. You like it? Mike looked back at me. It's okay, I guess. Not much to do, but I shrugged. But, he raised an eyebrow. I don't know. Not really been here long enough to make a proper opinion. You all lived here since you were born? Yeah, problem with that? Freya snapped. What? No, just making conversation. I shrugged again. Her reaction threw me for a loop, but she just nodded and motioned to where we were going to set up. Here's the blind spot. Jason grinned and ran up to it. Nobody could see us at all, and nobody could see the campfire we're going to build either. Won't the smoke tell them someone is here? I put down my rucksack. Nah, the mountains are too high and hide it from every direction. We're completely secluded. I followed suit and rolled out my sleeping bag, opening up the bag to pull out my snacks, food, and soft drinks. I feel stupid as I looked up to see that the other 3 pulled out alcohol. Freya and Mike laughed at the sight of me, but Jason shrugged. Hell, mixers make all this last longer. And at least someone had thought ahead and bring some food with them. The pair stopped laughing and awkwardly cleared their throats as I loaded a stick with a giant marshmallow. Every campfire needs marshmallows. I offered the bag around, but only Jason took one. He takes a can of this fizzy soda and fills the top of it with whiskey. I had never had alcohol before, and I was scared, but I was also a stupid 15-year-old who was craving to fit in with some popular kids. Every campfire needs stories too. Mike grins, and I slowly drank and strangely tasted a mix of soda and whiskey. They each take turns in telling stories about the ranch. Nothing I hadn't already heard or read before, but they really embellished it. So what do you think happened to the kids? I piped up. Were they kidnapped or murdered? Ah, that's the beauty of it. Nobody really knows because this is Skinwalker territory. I shivered a little. I didn't necessarily believe in skinwalkers. It wasn't something I had grown up with in my ancestry of stories passed down, but everyone knew what skinwalkers were, and I respected the stories and beliefs enough not to mess with them or their existence. I didn't know this ranch was linked to skinwalkers, and as I sat and listened to more campfire stories, I wished I would have just gone home. The fire was dying down, and glancing at my watch, I thought it was later than the .32 a.m. it read. Still no Lucy, Daniel, or Gary. Yeah, I don't know where they are. They should have been here by now. I guess they changed their plans. Jason shrugged and yawned. In the time it had taken me to drink my 1 Lay's soda, the 3 had gone through their various bottles, and it occurred to me that this wasn't their first time heavy drinking. I felt stupid for even entertaining the idea that it was, but pushed my thoughts from my mind and instead looked around the surroundings. My bladder had woken up, and I needed the pee. So, stupid question. Where would you recommend I use for the bathroom? Freya laughs. Wherever you like, just don't stink the place up. I looked around again and stood, picking up the teepee from my bag before heading off in the direction not too far from the camp but still out of sight. The last thing I needed was photo or video evidence of me with my pants around my ankles pissing behind a rock in the middle of nowhere. I dug a hole and did my business while doing a balancing act, carefully covering the hole in tissue after I stood up and checked for bugs on myself. I also didn't need a spider bite on my ass or elsewhere. I was just about to start heading back when I heard a scream. High-pitched and not too far away. Further than the camp, but not by much. I ran back and hoped I didn't trip on anything, only to find the three of them gone and blood on the floor around the dead fire. I spun around and crouched down trying to get my eyes to focus on something other than the rock formations. Another scream, further away this time, but still not too far. The sound bounced around the mountains and open air as I grabbed my bag and threw it on my back. I shuffled around low to the ground and moved towards the wooden fence on the other side of the camp. I tried my best to calm my breathing. This was obviously a prank, and they were going to jump out at any moment with phones in hand and flashes blinding me to catch me terrified while yelling, hooting and hollering with laughter. The campfire stories, the rumors, it was all a setup. It had to be. But as I moved closer to the fence, the scent of iron filled my nose. A strong scent of iron, and in the silver of moonlight from overhead, I could see more trails of blood and a building. A ranch building with walls and a door where I could hide. Between me and it were small stone outcrops that casted long shadows for me to stay hidden in. But even with that, the building looked miles away. Looking around, I had very little choice but to head for it. Keeping my rucksack to the cliffsides and rock formations, my eyes swept across every surface for whatever was out there, still hoping and praying silently that it was indeed a prank, and by Monday, I was going to be the joke everyone found hilarious. I heard small noises, and every time I stopped moving and held my breath waiting for it to pass. I had to cross in front of a cavern opening to get to the ranch, and I spent what seemed like forever deciding if I should stay low or just run. The decision was made for me as I heard something in the distance to my left. Not quite an animal and not quite human. A scream and a howl muddled together in some blood-curdling remix that I had never wanted to hear again. I ran for the ranch and fell through the door. Scrambling to my feet, I lifted the door back into place and put my back to it, holding it shut. I closed my eyes and held my breath until I was sure I was alone. The building wasn't large. It held a fireplace, an old table and chair, and a bookshelf. As my eyes got used to the light levels, I saw deep scratch marks through the wood, broken windows, and old dried blood. Moving carefully, I shuffled to a dark shadowed area out of the moonlight and laid myself there flat against the floor. My watch read 1:28 a.m., and the sun wouldn't rise until 6 a.m. Somehow, I had to stay exactly where I was until then. My backpack doubled as a makeshift pillow under my head, and I silently swore to myself for not picking up the sleeping bag. There was no going for it now. The temperature had dropped significantly, but not enough for me to see my breath at least. I was dozing off against the straps of my bag when I heard Jason yelling for help. It was definitely Jason's voice, and though I longed to lean up and direct him to me, something told me not to. My body stayed frozen in fear. He was close enough to me to hear him clearly and hear his echo around the mountains, and I had hoped that there were watchtowers in this area. Maybe the security would see him. Maybe I could be found too. But this was still a prank, right? Right. He was gonna find me and jump in and laugh at my terrified face and possibly piss-stained pants, because at this point I was just that scared. and I would have a fun new nickname come Monday at school. Piss Pants Penny. Yep. I'd roll with it and laugh at myself because this was all a joke. I swallowed hard and closed my eyes tight as Jason kept yelling. Calls for help that turned into incoherent yells, and then screams, and then an animal noise and more screaming. His screaming stopped and turned into gurgles. As the silence took over the night once again, I could hear a low thrumming and eventually words. I couldn't understand these words, but they were being spoken as if in mantra. It sounded to be echoing off the walls of the surrounding mountains and formations. It was loud enough for me to make out a language I'd never heard before, words I couldn't understand. I covered my ears and closed my eyes tight again. I concentrated completely on my breathing. At some point, I passed out or fell asleep. I woke to bright sunlight and the sound of helicopter rotor blades overhead. Leaning up from my curled up spot on the floor, I carefully looked around and saw the area bathed in sunlight. My watch said 9:21 a.m. I wasted no time in running outside with my pack and waving my arms around at the helicopter. The following days are blurry at best and pushed to the back of my memory at worst. The helicopter landed and I was arrested for trespassing. It's the happiest day I have ever been, honestly. As we lifted off the floor, I looked out the window and saw dry trails of blood right by the ranch building. Whatever it was had been that close to me. I still question why it left me alone. It must have known that I was there, but left me be. The three who were meant to join us, Lucy, Daniel, and Gary, got held up on a hiking trip when they finally arrived and saw nothing but blood trails. They knew something had gone wrong. To give them credit, they turned tail and went straight to one of the patrolling security, regardless of what trouble they would be in. They spent the night giving statements after the blood trails had been confirmed as actually blood and not just part of a prank. Nobody was willing to fly over or head into the ranch during the night, mostly because they weren't stupid teenagers who took stories for granted. They believed and investigated those missing kids for years, and now added 3 more to the growing list. I was de-arrested shortly after I told them everything I knew. I told them I knew it sounded stupid, but that those 3 teenagers were never going to be seen again. I heard something that had killed them, and what is weirder to me is that the officers who interviewed me agreed. They believed everything I had said and didn't even question my mental state. No questions about alcohol or drugs because they knew this was more of the same. Apparently, it has been years since anyone tried staying overnight because anyone remotely close to the state knows it's not safe or smart to even try. It's seen as a rite of passage to just walk around there in the dark, and neither Lucy, Gary, or Daniel could figure out why Freya, Mike, or Jason would try to stay there overnight. They had all grown up knowing the legends and being told the stories. They all knew the risk, and the very real disappearances of teenagers who have tried and failed. I'm the first to have survived that night on the ranch and lived to tell the tale. I'm older now, a privilege that was not afforded to those 3 teenagers that night. My parents finally divorced after I hit 21, but apparently couldn't live without each other. Dad died first after his drunken bar brawl. He was punched repeatedly in the head, and it caused a slow bleed, so he died in his sleep after a very bad headache. Mom went off a very wet road at a high speed 2 weeks later after his funeral. I'm still not sure if it was on purpose or not, but she wrapped her car around a tree, and the airbag was faulty so it failed to deploy. She was on a back road and wasn't found for 3 hours. She was already dead. I sold the house and moved away from that state with Lucy. Lucy is my wife. She knows everything from that night, and she regularly helps calm me down when I wake up from a nightmare. She buys me fun nightlights and tries to help ease my anxiety about the dark, and even got me a noise machine for my birthday because I can't stand silence. What she doesn't know is that every night since then, I've heard the chanting of that language I don't understand. I hear it clear, as if it was in the room with me.